Welcome to the Town of Windham Private Roads Ad Hoc Committee Public Forum. We'll introduce ourselves, starting with Corey.
Corey McDonald.
Alan Finney.
Michael Manning.
Julie Lunt Farley.
Brett Jones.
Tim Mangum.
Michael Devoid.
John Rowe.
And I'm Amanda Lassard, the town planner.
The purpose of the Private Roads Ad Hoc Committee shall to review the Town of Windham's regulations with regard to the creation, extension, and improvement of private roads and development along and access by private roads, and to make recommendations about changes to the town's regulations regarding the creation, extension, and improvement of private roads and development along and access by private roads. The charge, it shall be the responsibility of the committee, 1, to review the Town of Windham's regulations with regard to the creation, extension, and improvement of private roads and development along and access by private roads, and to make recommendations about changes to the town's regulations regarding the creation, extension, and improvement of private roads and development along and access by private roads. 2, to seek input and recommendations from experts and other stakeholders such as the Maine Department of Transportation, Maine Department of Environmental Protection, Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District, local experts, the general public, and other stakeholders. 3, to hold one or more public meetings or forums other than the committee's regular working meetings for the purpose of informing the general public about the committee's work and seek input on issues related to the creation, extension, and improvement of private roads and development along and access by private roads, and on the committee's draft recommendations before making formal recommendations to the town council, and 4, to report regularly on the progress and identify any resource needs to the town council. With that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Amanda Lassard.
Thanks. Brett, maybe you can just take a second, though, and talk about kind of what work the committee's done, at least fulfilling some of that charge. Like you had consultation with other... Yes,
we've met with most of the groups listed on the charge. We've had, I don't know how many meetings we've had now, but numerous meetings to review the current standards and come up with some ideas and work with within that, trying to create a working draft to present to the council for review.
Great, thanks. So we're here tonight, though, to address that, getting some public feedback on kind of what the committee's worked on so far. But first, though, I just wanted to kind of bring everyone up to speed about kind of why this committee's here and what we're doing. So the town of Windham's had private street standards in our subdivision ordinance since the 70s. But it wasn't until 2009 where the town adopted standards for private roads that were not part of a subdivision. It established that the private roads that existed on that date, though, were grandfathered and didn't need any improvements. Then 2015, there was some issues off of the Lakeside Drive neighborhood with access for public safety vehicles, and the council adopted a moratorium on development along those roads to kind of work on some of these access issues, and we kicked off a couple years of discussion related to private road standards, but some of the information that was presented in 2015 was that nearly half of Windham's roads are private, and that about 40% of the dwelling units in town are on private ways. So the council discussed the private road standards throughout 2016, and in October 2017 there were some revisions adopted to sections 500 and 900 of our land use ordinance related to streets outside of subdivision, and 900 are the subdivision review standards. They related specifically to requiring that newer extensions of private roads must then upgrade the existing private road network back to the nearest public street. We no longer allow new private roads with connections to public streets, and we eliminated the backlot standards. Following the adoption of those ordinance amendments, the council discussed creating this committee. And also in April 2018, they adopted an exemption to this upgrading the whole network of private roads back to the public street to allow for property owners to create a new length of road that would create frontage in their zoning district without having to upgrade the existing road network. So this committee was created and appointed. You started meeting in July, and this is the work you've been doing, and we're kind of at a point to get some public input. The changes that are proposed at this point focus on the rules that apply to the requirements of improving that existing private road. So there's proposed changes to the land use ordinance in section 300 definitions. 550 is the street standards. And Appendix B is the tables that kind of detail the street design and construction standards. There's no proposed changes to the rules related to public roads, or private roads, sorry, that apply during a subdivision application. So there was a handout in the back for people if they wanted. I'm just going to kind of give a broad overview of what those changes are. Section 300, there's a new definition for a new type of street that's called private road upgraded and extended. I'll get into a little bit later what that is exactly. And there's a clarification in the definition for a waiver that a waiver could apply to this section 550 streets. The changes that are in this section 550, the street standards, are for specifically related to language that requires the upgrade to the existing private road network. The proposal is to replace the existing language for the upgrade to the nearest public street to a requirement that the existing private road should be upgraded to an amount that's equal in length to the proposed or extended road, and that improvement would be to this new road standard if the existing private road serves 30 or fewer lots. Otherwise, the existing private road would be upgraded to the major private road standard. There's a requirement that all private road plans would be reviewed by the town engineer or a consulting engineer. It does allow for provisions that waivers may be granted by the planning board following some detailed review criteria that are listed. Specifically, it's additionally asking that the applicant have a professional engineer certify that the proposed road with the waiver will be adequate to accommodate traffic. There's new requirements for the private road plan and a road maintenance agreement be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. When the planning board is reviewing a private road application, when there's waivers requested, they are required to hold a site walk. And then we detail an appeals process for the planning board decision. Finally, the Appendix B street design standards, there's two tables, tables 3 and 4, and it details the requirements for this new upgraded and extended private road standard. And it essentially is the major private street standard without pavement. Whoops, so that's the brief overview. So we're here tonight to seek public input on these proposed changes. There's not, a standing room only crowd, so I can kind of be brief on the ground rules. If we need to, be mindful of the time to let other people speak, and if you're standing up to provide a similar comment to someone else, you can certainly just say that you agree and not necessarily repeat it. And we will take some opportunity to respond to any particular questions you may have, kind of following a round of public comment. So with that, I could give it back to the chair to ask people to come up and comment on the draft.
Yeah, if anyone has a comment, they can stand at the podium or sit at the table. Just have to use a microphone so it's recorded.
My name's Linda McDonald, and I would like to talk. I've got a lot of questions, but I'd like to speak about one thing first. One thing I have a question. It says private ways do not include those typically referred to as tote roads or wood roads. Now I'm thinking of specifically Scotland Road for one. The road has been in prior to this October 2009. There's proof it's been in. It's on a plan. It's mortgaged. It has an address. The whole works. However, it goes over our own land, and it is a private road. And at the time, everyone seemed to think they needed to go down and see where it went, and it goes to the back of one of our son's houses. So, needless to say, we have not kept it up to make it inviting. Are you going to call that a tote road now? Because and even in front of our own house, we have the road did go. It was extended, but we had parked a trailer there so that people couldn't go down unless they were asking to go to the fields or whatever. Now, does that turn it into a tote road?
Well, my understanding, if it was built prior to 2009, it's considered private way.
Yeah, I know, but it says that it's not talking about something that's typically referred to as a tote road. So if it were constructed prior to that and you wanted to call it a tote road, it still would be a tote road.
Yeah, they want to.
Can you clarify that?
I can, but I think I'd want to just kind of hold all questions until the end.
Okay.
But I think that's a specific question about a specific road, and we haven't proposed any changes to the private way definition, and I think I'd want to look at the specifics to give you an answer. I can't make that determination right here this evening, but it sounds like it was built prior to October 2009.
It was. It was. Mm-hmm. But it does make a difference because, anyway, all right. We've got a parcel that's probably somewhere between 30 and 40 acres off Nash Road, separate. It's off from Nash Road. We escaped the back. We could, as it is now, you're allowed to have 3 dwelling units on one lot, provided the lot is big enough. It has the density, unless that's been changed very recently. But it has been that you can put 3 dwelling units off from one lot. That lot being 30 or 40 acres, we could easily have 3 dwelling units on that lot. We did escape the backlot thing, we thought, because we do have enough frontage. We've got over 600 feet on Nash Road. Okay, but it would use the same driveway. Well, now you've gone, and these would still all be our own. Not that we're selling, we're keeping. We'd either keep one for a grandchild or whatever, but we're keeping it all. We don't want to sell a lot and mess up our privacy after going in 900 or 1,000 feet. So we get in, if we go in there and we decide we want to do that 3rd dwelling unit, we now can't, because we can only, off from our driveway, we can only put 2 houses off from that 900 to 1,000 foot driveway. Can't put a 3rd one because it's going to be a private road. It will be considered a road, not a driveway. It would ordinarily have to be brought up to the standards then that you require for a private road, but there's another problem. It can't be a private road because it goes out onto Nash Road, and you can't put any more private roads. So it's absolutely not doable unless we want to put in a public road into whatever it may be, 600 feet or whatever. We'd have to put in a public road to go to 3 of our lots. We'd have to have a place to turn around and a place to have the public come in narrowly where we don't want them. That's why we're moving that far off the road. We don't want the public coming in and turning around and dumping trash like they do now anyway. So what do you do in a case like that? Or we can put in, like I say, a second driveway. Now, this was a spot that my husband and I had planned on being on when we got older, and we've arrived. If we go over there, that it is a long driveway, but we do have sons that live near us, and presumably if we got live to get older, they would presumably keep us plowed out and keep our road up and help us, and they could even go out through that way. Well, it's a little much to ask, though, that they do another 900-foot driveway for, I mean, you end up having, it's ridiculous, the maintenance, anything it's ridiculous to have to do that, and it makes no sense because we've even got the frontage we need, everything, just because someone wants to come up with something worse than we already have. In addition to that, if we did bite the bullet somewhere down the road, didn't do it right now, but down the road said, okay, fine, we'll put the public road in. Well, there has been talk, I know from certain council meetings, there's been talk that some of them believe that it won't be long before the town won't accept any more public roads. So unless we hurry up and jump to it, we could be in the process of building a public road that won't be accepted. I did believe when I listened to the council when they were talking about forming this committee, I believe that it was talking about making some of the relaxing some of the things that they had that made it absolutely not even usable for family parcels and things. It doesn't sound like there's been any relaxing. It sounds as though, to me, that you've taken the opportunity to get some more of your own agenda in here that you may want for some reason, but there's been no relaxing or no consideration whatsoever to really people that do have large pieces of land. So there is that one, and I do have more, but I'll sit down.
Thank you. And no one's going to jump up, so.
Good evening. My name's Bill Walker. Currently reside at 39 Falmouth Road. Also a planning board member here in the town of Windham. First off, thank all of you for your time and your service. Being a planning board member, I understand the ungratefulness it is to have people come up and criticize your work and your thoughts and that type of stuff. But I apologize for that because there will probably be more of that than there will be you did an awesome job. So thank you for your service. Please don't take it as personal criticism. It's just thoughts that we have how to make it better for the whole, because in the end, we're representing all of Windham, not certain people. So with that said, I think one of the other things that should be brought forward in 2017 when this ordinance changes were passed, it was passed with a split planning board on its recommendations, and it was passed with a split council. Both votes were a 3-4 vote, and it was a split. So already you have gone ahead and put into effect ordinances that even the town government is not 100% behind and had questioned at the time. With that said, these road ordinances took some of the land rights of people, and we've seen that impact today within the growth farm zone. And some of you may be going, well, how can that be? Well, how that is as Ms. McDonald was up here explaining, it's very hard for people to get the value out of their land. There are people that came up and testified in front of the planning board. I've got a college fund. How is it that I can get the value out of my land? I can't afford to put the road in. So what do? They have to go sell that land to a developer that will eventually put in more density, more lots, and be able to create that value that they're not able to. In doing so, the example I'll use is you have 4 lots. And this person wants to develop 4 lots, and in order to do that, they have to put in a 1,500-foot long road to develop those 4 lots. Using the numbers that Mr. Earl gave us earlier on, which based on construction costs are probably not accurate, but I figure that's the numbers that all of us are still using and have. The cost of that road is $337,000. That works out to $84,000 a lot. Now keep in mind that the average lot in the town of Windham goes for $60,000 to $70,000. So already we're upside down on the cost of this lot. Now if we were to put in a 1,500-foot long gravel road, the cost of that road would be $150,000. $37,000 a lot, starting to get to more of an economical standpoint. Now, we can't afford to put in a lot, so I'm going to go sell my land to a developer. That developer comes in and does a 15-house cluster subdivision. Same cost, $337,000, but now divided over 15 lots. That drops that cost to $22,000 a lot. We have now put the developer in a better position than we have our own residents. As you can see, the ordinance, as I said, is favored more towards the developer versus a family homestead. The real problem is that this ordinance was designed to upgrade old camp roads. Since it's enacted, we have not seen any development occur to correct those roads. There was one project that came before the planning board that was on a private road, and at which point they had looked at upgrading the road network to the first or to the public way. The inability of the developer to have ownership of the road prevented them from widening. Then the cost to move power, upgrade the road, has most likely killed the project because it has not come back before the planning board. New projects coming in have been designed to the new street standard. They are wide roads that are not residential in scale. There are many neighborhoods in this town and other communities across Maine and New Hampshire that have 20 to 22-foot wide roads with lawns up to the road that have not been an issue. Now let's go to the governing bodies that govern everything, and one that I'll use is NFPA. For those that don't know, NFPA stands for the National Fire Protection Association. NFPA 1 talks about fire department access roads. And the requirement is for a road that's 20 feet wide so that you can get in a fire apparatus and move equipment around. US DOT, an acceptable lane width for a road is 9 to 12 feet wide. A 12-foot wide lane width is a freeway. If we look at US DOT and the accident traffic modifications that they use, the lowest that the table goes to is 500 annual average daily trips. If we look at that, modification for an 11 to 12-foot road is 1.01. For a 10-foot road is 1.02, and for a 9-foot road is 1.05. Now, if we go up to 2,000 annual average daily trips, for a 9-foot road it goes up to 1.5 times, or 1.5, 10-foot 1.3, and 11 and 12 stay at the 1.01 and 1.05 respectively. The point I'm trying to drive home here is that most neighborhoods have less than 45 homes in them. And they produce 155 annual average daily trips. Less than 1/3 of that 500. So a lane width of 9 to 12 feet in a residential neighborhood is mute. The DOT also goes on to say, the wider the travel lane, the faster the people go. And the reason that highways and roads have wider travel lanes and have breakdown lanes or shoulders is so that there's more margin for error when you're going at a higher rate of speed and you have the ability to get vehicles off the road when they break down. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking 9 or 10 feet isn't wide enough. Keep in mind that 9 or 10 feet equates to an 18 or 20-foot road. Again, NFPA 1 says that 20 feet is wide enough for fire department access and equipment. I recently oversaw the installation of a 16-foot wide private way with 1-foot shoulders, so essentially 18-foot travel way. We were able to pass a dump truck and pickup trucks by one another on that 18-foot wide road. I'd be more than happy to take you out to that 18-foot wide road that I just got done plowing not long ago and show you that we can still pass a dump truck and a pickup truck on that roadway. Before I give you specific comments on the ordinance, I encourage you and want to leave you with these thoughts. Prior to the ordinance, every road built to the 2009 construction standard has not been the issue. Illegal subdivisions, slow growth subdivisions, and the legacy roads are the problem. And legacy roads, I mean the old camp roads from the 50s. Private roads are a positive thing for this town. Private roads, if set up properly with a road association and the road deeded to the road association, saves the town money. This town cannot afford to have these additional roads. This town cannot live up to its standards that it's already obligated it to with its existing roads. A prime example, we had another project that came before the planning board. Said project, when it was the first phase went in, was obligated to upgrade a town road, move power, ditching, and the town said, we'll pave the road. Phase 2 came in, we're looking at the new town ordinance, and we're saying to the developer, you have to pave this road. Developer came back and said, why do I have to pay for it? I did what I was obligated to. I widened the road, I resurfaced the road, I moved the power, but the town hasn't paved it. Another prime example, Anglers Road. When that was redeveloped for the WDC, we didn't pave it all the way back to the commercial lot that we sold. We didn't even bring the town water back. How is it that we as a community can go ahead and set a standard for our residents and not do as we say? Specifically in regards to the ordinance itself, format over substance first, my recommendation would be to take waivers out of Section D and create a Section E and take the existing Section E and make it an F. And the reason for that is waivers now exist under D, which says private roads not part of a subdivision application, where you refer to waivers throughout the whole thing. So I think it would, just for ease of application and what you're trying to do, I think it makes sense to pull waivers out and put it into its own subsection so that it is applied to all of 550 versus one section. In regards to 550B, it does not address the issues due to camp roads and existing problems. There are many roads within this town that are camp roads that will never, ever be able to go and upgrade to the existing standards that you show. We need to figure out what we need to do with those. Are we going to upgrade the subsurface? A lot of those roads, you can get to 18 feet. So are we happy to stay with the 18 feet? Are we happy to increase the gravel subsurface? Are we happy to do something with ditching and stormwater runoff? Something to consider. The other thing that B does is it leaves opportunity on the table. And many of you are probably saying, what does he mean by that? We're asking for a certain amount of road to be upgraded. There are many housing developments that would generate better opportunity for upgrading more of the existing road network. It should be up to the planner and the town staff to identify those opportunities and to take advantage of them. I have seen projects in the state of New Hampshire and in Maine that whole roads have been upgraded for almost a mile because of the type of project it was and the type of money that we were talking about and the ability of the developer to reinvest within the community. The other thing is there's other instruments that the community can use, and the council can discuss this at their own leisure, which is TIFs. And when used properly, can really bring large benefits to this community. Section C, new streets with direct connections to public streets, no new private roads. This really needs to be revisited. I'll give you a prime example of a project that's going on right now that came before the planning board. A developer bought 3 lots. The 3 lots were made a while ago. And at this point, they're sitting there trying to figure out how to put in a 24-foot wide road with 2-foot shoulders. 28 feet. At the end of the day, it's going to service 4 houses. Now, one of the things that the developer has done because of the expense of being able to try to do this, and I'm surmising, I don't know this as fact, but having developed and have known the numbers, I believe what he's sitting there doing is saying, I can't afford to do this. As soon as I can find that sheet that I have my notes on, I actually wrote the numbers down. Oops. Pardon me. So, to give you an example of this subdivision, it is a road that is, did I write it down? 400 feet long. So we're going to create a 400-foot long road that the developer also plans on trying to turn over to the town. So now the town has a 400-foot public way to maintain. The cost of a paved road, again using the numbers that all of us have, is $90,000. You're doing a gravel road is $40,000. To extend the water, not getting into the ledge issue that they have to deal with, is $32,000. So let's do the economics here and let's look at something and the benefits the town is missing out on by some of this ordinance that's been put in place. So 3 lots at $60,000 market rate is $180,000 that the developer has in his hand to be able to figure out how to pay for this infrastructure and pay for his time and make some money. So we take our $90,000 road out. We take $15,000 out for design costs. We take $3,000 out for our survey, another $15,000 for our electrical, and $15,000 for cable and phone. Leaves us with $42,000. That's $14,000 per lot. That's a 23% gross profit. Everyone's like, wow, 23%, that's great. But out of that 23%, we have to pay interest costs for carrying the property, why we developed the project, because all the land's not going to sell off at once, so we got to account for that. We have to pay for the developer's time. We have to pay for attorneys, and then we've got to be able to do with any price fluctuations or any hidden costs that we haven't identified throughout that. The risk in that scenario is the market, the ledge, and the town, and whether or not the town takes the road over. Because if they go to the town with this road and the town council decides not to take it, you've now burdened 4 lot owners with a 24-foot wide paved road that will need to be resurfaced in 20 years. It's awfully expensive to put on those people. Now, let's go back to the gravel road situation, and let's think about this for a minute. Same $180,000 the developer has for his 3 lots. $40,000 for the gravel road, $15,000 for the design cost, $3,000 for survey, $15,000 for electrical, and $15,000 for cable and phone. He's left with $92,000. he now can afford to put in the $32,000 water main extension and bring it up the road. And now all the homeowners along that road have the ability to tie into that. And oh, by the way, this is also near a quarry that people have been complaining about blasting and turbidity in their wells. So the town is missing out on the opportunity to bring better water quality to a section of town because we want wider roads. So taking the $32,000 out, that leaves $60,000 for the developer, which is a 33%. Now, granted, his risk here is more to do with the market, the ledge. Also narrowed scope because now he's putting in a gravel road, so not as many people want to live on a gravel road. You have to have a road association. There's other maintenance costs. So his price overall on the lot of land will end up going down because there's some negative attributes to it. But again, he's got the ability to work that. So I think you might want to go back and revisit C and consider other alternatives. In D, private roads not part of subdivision application. I think there are many people on the submission requirements. It talks about an application form. An accurately scaled plan shall be prepared by a Maine licensed professional engineer. Registered land surveyors are capable of doing this. Registered landscape architects are capable of coordinating and doing this type of stuff. I don't understand what you're looking to gain by the engineer. So I think you may want to think about, someone that's authorized, a design professional of some description. Just food for thought. Let's skip that part. So moving down to 3, under D3, it talks about review authority. All private roads, application forms, and plans will be submitted to be approved by the code enforcement officer. And then it goes on to talk about waivers. The waivers really should be taken out of that and put into a waiver section. And then it also goes on to talk about all private roads, road plans shall be reviewed by the town engineer or consulting engineer. I think you need to start thinking about private roads or private ways that access 2 or more lots. Site walks. Again, the other thought was instead of having the code enforcement officer approve this, was the planning board. And I'm going to go more into that thought process here in just a second. Actually, maybe now's the best time to go into that. So one of the things that caused all of this was a certain area of town and illegal subdivision. Many of you are familiar with said subdivision. Part of the problem with that subdivision was someone went and got a road permit, and then they proceeded to put all the deeds into everyone they know's name. Leave in an initial, leave out an initial, so on and so forth. So overnight, a subdivision and all these lots appear, and the town has no say or nothing in it. I think what we need to seriously consider, anything that's not coming before the planning board as a subdivision should come before the planning board as a road approval. And here's part of the thought process behind that. The planning board understands subdivision and understands subversion of subdivision law. Planning board also looks at the technicalities of all these things and has an understanding of that. But as you go through it, one of the things that you can do is now you're asking for, when someone comes in with a plan, to sit there and say, provide a plan with lots shown on the plan. Any private way or road that's going to provide road access or lot frontage to those said lots, provide us a survey and show us what it is. And that road may come in initially as 2 lots. And then someone else later on down the road go, well, I'm going to split my lot. Well, in order to split it, they need to come back and revise it. And what it does is it stops that noise of someone being able to quietly in the background create a subdivision that no one knows about, and can then avoid many of the ordinances that we have within our community. So, something that I think that it would sound like if I was to be king for a day and could draft it, I'm sure the town attorney would have something to say, but the planning board may approve the use of a 50-foot private way to provide frontage and access to individual lots of land in accordance with the following provisions. A plan showing the private way, and if you want, Amanda, I can email this to you. A plan showing the private way shall be prepared by a registered land surveyor. The plan shall be labeled Plan of a Private Way and shall provide an approved block for signatures of the planning board members. The plan shall delineate the proposed way in each of the lots to be serviced by the private way. A street plan cross-section drainage plan, and erosion and sedimentation control plan meeting the requirements of section 500 shall be submitted for each private way serving 2 or more lots. Part of the reason I say 2 or more is in this town, we can put in a driveway servicing 2 lots. What happens is all of a sudden, that 2-lot driveway now services 40 houses. A little bit of an exaggeration, but trying to drive the point home. So, submission of approval of the plan shall meet the requirements of section 900, geographical information system, plan submissions, and specifications. C. The plan should bear notes that the town of Windham will not be responsible for the maintenance, repair, or plowing of the private way, and that future lot divisions utilizing the private way are prohibited without prior approval of the Windham Planning Board. D. If the private way is to provide access to 2 or more lots, a maintenance agreement shall be required by the planning board and recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds. The maintenance agreement shall specify the rights and responsibilities of each lot owner with respect to the maintenance, repair, plowing of the private way. E. The construction of the private way. You can insert this table that you folks have worked on. F. The plan shall be recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds within 90 days of the date of the planning board approval. If the plan is not recorded within this period, the approval of the planning board shall be null and void. That eliminates the creation of paper streets that never get developed, which we have many of in the town. G. In reviewing requests for approval of private ways under this subparagraph, the planning board shall apply such standards and criteria and may impose such conditions as are applicable in the conditional uses under section 500 and 900 of this ordinance. H. The owner and owners shall convey to the town an easement described to meet nets and bounds for sewer purposes over the entire right-of-way and shall record the easement in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds. I, after the private way has been approved by the planning board to provide access to lot or lots, no further lots shall be created which are to provide access by means of private way without the prior approval of the use of the private way for access as such lots by the planning board under this subsection. And J, at least 5 days prior to commencing construction of the private way in accordance with the ordinance specifications and with adequate provisions for stormwater drainage, the applicant will pay an inspection fee as established by the town council. Such fee shall be made payable to the town of Windham, so on and so forth. That stops the whole issue that happened over on Lake or Forest Lake area. If that was in our ordinance, that road would have never been created. All those lots would have never appeared overnight off of that road. I still think it's something that we need to consider. When we talk about 7B, it talks about evidence of a road maintenance agreement has been recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds. I think you want to consider the fact that somehow, and I think I addressed it further back when you talk about maintenance agreements, and if so, I apologize, but one of the issues over in the Forest Lake area, if we delve in and do the autopsy, is those folks technically don't own the road. Many private roads within this town, the legacy roads, are not owned by the people of the road association. So what really needs to happen if we were to do it was to A, make sure that the road gets deeded over to the road association. This will take a little bit of work with the town attorney to figure out the language associated with that so the town doesn't get in trouble. But the idea being the road association is established and the road association has ownership of the road. And then you can tie it to everyone's deeds and their obligation to the road association. That gives them the ability to put liens on road or liens on properties and the ability to have some teeth. I think under waivers. So under waivers, you had, and I'm sorry I moved waivers back because of the fact that I thought it should be its own subsection. Under waivers, you talk about the planning board may waive the requirements of Appendix B, street design standards, if it finds that extraordinary and unnecessary hardship, now not self-imposed, may result from strict compliance with the street standard ordinance. Now, I don't know how many of you have gone before BZA or been associated with the BZA, but let's talk about unnecessary, or the legal definition of unnecessary hardship, because it's a hard hurdle to overcome. And I'm sure that was probably your intention when you put it there. But let's talk about the definition. A deprivation of an owner's rights to the beneficial use of property that is caused when an ordinance makes it impossible to receive a reasonable return from the property. Now, if we go back to our 4-lot subdivision, and the fact that if I put in a public way, my lots are only worth $84,000, and market rate is only 60 to 70, I now can ask for a waiver. I don't need to follow that. I can prove to you you have taken and created unreasonable hardship. Again, I think you need to think about some of this language and revisit it and what you're trying to accomplish. There are unintended consequences. We're already seeing them within the town. Let's not create any more, please. For that, I'm sure you're tired of listening to me. Again, I appreciate all the work you've done. I know it's hard. I know it takes time away from your family. And again, I think we really need to concentrate on the whole of the town and not just a couple incidences that may have happened in specific areas. We represent over 17,000 people. We should be representing everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I am glad he spoke because almost everything would be what I'd like to have said. But I do have a couple of questions from what he said. One is he was mentioning, changing it so that now you only can have one lot off of one driveway to prevent this sneaky road. Is that what he was saying or not saying? What, I don't know what he did. Well, okay, if he didn't mean that, what, do you know what he meant, or no? Because I think that is going to make it rough for people that have, a family plot, and you want to use one driveway. So that, if he didn't mean that, then fine anyway. When he was mentioning turning roads over to a road association, there are some that you absolutely you can't do it. For instance, I know about Inland Farm Road and Scotland Road and Studio Drive. Those already exist. For one thing, you can't really make people join an association. You can go the state route for a maintenance agreement, but you still can't take the roads because it's part of their lot. Not only is it part of their lot, but it creates part of their density. So the town would have to take it by eminent domain, and they'd have to go and get waivers for everybody's lot size. So it really basically isn't doable to do that. Now, it seemed as though so far it's been talking about when you are getting your frontage off from this extension. But I don't think it says it here specifically. For instance, right now, if the one I told you about on Nash Road, we wouldn't be getting our frontage off from the private road we put in there. Our frontage is on Nash Road. We've got it over 600 feet. So we would only be getting our driveway entrance getting to the lot. But I'm not sure that might be what you're thinking or what he was thinking, but I couldn't see where it said that. So maybe all of this is just if you're going to get frontage off from it. For instance, on Inland Farm Road, if somebody already has all the frontage they need on the path that's already made, is this going to impact them at all? Well, it seems as though it will if they wanted to put a driveway with maybe two lots, or at least three. But two. Would it be with two? Not now, right? If they got frontage off what's existing.
The definition of a driveway is that it can only serve two lots.
Two lots.
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose technically you could say we could still do what we want to off from Nash Road. We could do what we want to, but because it would only be one lot. But if we died and our kids needed to sell them separately, they couldn't do it. So really it's not doable. Is that right?
Go ahead.
Okay, that's really all I had. So anyway, I would like you to address that, those particular things.
Hi, my name is Bill McDonald, and my question is on a farm zone. Why gravel wouldn't be something that you would consider as being more acceptable in that zone, rather than across the board in all the zones? It is more of a rural setting, more of a rural area. To use pavement, it just doesn't seem to go along with the area. Why couldn't there be more opportunities to use the gravel road in that area, more rural setting? Some people like it better. I mean, shouldn't we have a choice in the town where if you might want to have a paved road and all the things that go with it. I mean, you might want to be more of in the country and on a gravel road. Was there any consideration for this being, gravel roads in the farm zone? And I kind of have to go along with the planning board fellow that just spoke. Some people, you really only have a choice. You either can do something with your land and what you can afford to do and what you can in small increments, or you just have to sell it to someone that can do the whole thing. And if it seems like you're making somebody do more than they can afford, you're penalizing them for being able to do it in use their own land and do what they want to do rather than give it up to a developer. Some things definitely go on scale, the more you have, but you ought to be able, if you own the land, you ought to be able to do 1 or 2 lots, and like you're allowed by the state law. You can sell a lot off every 5 years if you can. But it ought to be so that you can, as a property owner, do it without having to sell the whole thing. I mean, I'm at a stage now where I've been paying taxes for 45 years on the land, and now I'm at an age that I need to do something to have a unit that's more applicable to my stage in life. And so if I don't sell a lot, and I've had to do that along to pay the taxes on the land. So, you do what you do, but that's a right. I mean, that's a land, a right I have, owning that land and paying the taxes on it. But now I'm at a point where if it's made too difficult, I don't have any choice. And I want to give my land to my children and my grandchildren, and I'd like to be able to do that. And it sounded like some of these things could be achieved if it's looked at differently. I remember when we asked the town fire department to come in and go over Inland Farm Road as far as the distance, the width of it, because we were doing other roads. Some of which were we went to subdivision, but they were very similar. And as long as it's 18 feet, if the surface is 18 feet, he said, we got no problem with fire getting in there. But the town could do a lot more in regard to helping some of these developments or roads, private roads, by saying, we're not going to be able to service you if you don't sand it, or if you don't have the potholes taken care of, or things like that. And it is dangerous. And if the town could help by saying, look, we're not going to be able to service you unless you do this. But I couldn't get anybody to write a letter so that I could go to the people that are supposed to help and pay for that. It would have been a lot easier if I had a letter from the town that says they got to be sanded, or they won't be coming down here, or even the post office. You can't get anyone to help you in that situation if everyone complains that the roads are that way. There could be better communication and better help for property owners on these private roads, because they're willing to do it. But some won't, and then it discourages others. So unless the town, and if they want it, why don't they say it? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Scott McDonald. I'm from Inland Farm. Basically, I'm kind of discouraged with the whole thing. When I first built my house, I had a lot of rights. I got another piece of land to give to my other kid I had and stuff. Basically, at this point, I've kind of just forgotten about the whole thing. I'll get through till the kids are out of school and worry about it then. I don't understand why we need to have a paved. Now we have to pave, and you're right at the end of the road that's the way you want it, or you probably wouldn't bother being there. Why would you have to pave? I guess it's 500 feet if I read it correctly now, because you get 250 feet, and now you've got to go 250 feet back. And then you have the rest of the dirt road that you liked, but you have to pave and incur all this expense. I don't understand what benefit that has to anybody. It's all private land, and it really hinders anybody. I mean, we have dirt roads now. The kids ride their bicycles around. It's traffic slow. It's easier to upkeep. I don't understand how that's affecting anybody. Why should I have to pave 500 feet of road and have all these and go before the planning board and all that to have another house every 5 years or whatever it is? I just don't understand the reasoning for that. I don't understand how that helps. I mean, if you were doing your road, you'd probably have your excavator dropped some gravel to fix some of the spots that are worse or whatever, but to have to pave, I mean, you're talking by the time you put power in, and by the time you did all of this, and then it sounds easy to go before the planning board, but I was on the planning board, and you have to have copies of plans for everybody on the planning board, and a lot of people they don't feel comfortable before the planning board, so now you have to hire somebody to go in for you, is what most people do. You shouldn't have to do that for 1 or 2 lots. If you're doing a subdivision, that's what the planning board is for. This isn't subdivision. This is I don't understand why we're putting all these rules on this because something went bad somewhere else. This still isn't fixing the bad somewhere else, and it's making it. I don't want 500 feet of pavement where I am. I don't want it there. So why am I forced to do that to give one of my kids a piece of land when they don't want it there either, and nobody else is even going to be there? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I think in the farm zone it should be able to be dirt, but I kind of feel bad for other people that maybe aren't necessarily in the farm zone, which it sounds like they're doing away with anyway. I'm not sure how that's going, but if it's not affecting the rest of the town, I don't understand why you can't have a little bit of freedom to do what you choose to do. I mean, otherwise we should all just go to the town and see what they want us to build and how they want us to do it. And I mean, that seems to be what it's turning into now. It's pretty tough for a kid to build a house starting out. I'm glad I'm not a kid now, coming into the workforce. Well, when I started, I stayed in the camper while I started to build my house and stuff. Well, it looks like those days are over. They're going to need $80,000 to put the road in before they even start with their power or something. I mean, how are they going to do that? Is that really helping anybody to give them a piece of land that the expenses to put a house in is more than the land's worth? I mean, this is what it's turning into, and the only chance anybody's going to have is to sell the whole thing to a developer and let them go through and it doesn't sound like too many people like that idea either. So I don't know but you're forcing it. You're absolutely forcing it. If we have all of these rules, I guess I just don't understand what purpose it serves for me to have to pave 500 feet at the end of a dirt road. Especially in a farm zone. I mean, I've got an old horse. He doesn't want to walk up the tar. The kids I just don't understand it. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Chief Libby, welcome.
Good evening. Just a few things. I have no particular opposition to private roads. The biggest concern that we run into is from the residents on those private roads and gaining access to them in the case of an emergency. So when looking at these, we look at least most recently in the short time I've been here is, Anglers Road, and we get into a lot of these situations where they may not have the rights to improve those roads like we talked about earlier. But we look at Anglers Road and trying to get into Anglers Road, the issues of James Way and Brewski and Lazy Acres when that was expanded and trying to get in, nothing was done from River Road in, but now you have a 20-foot box cut gravel road. And so the biggest thing that is laid before us is adequacy, what's adequate. So, and I think we've done a pretty good job trying to lay that out of what that adequate road might look like. But in looking at the draft that you have, probably one of the biggest things that stood out in something that might help some of those examples is if the option was there that if the requirement does go in that if you put in a 200-foot road that you have to improve 200 feet of the existing road, that could go back to the nearest public way. And that would help some of those issues of, thinking of James Way and Brewski, that angle, when Cumberland told us they were no longer going to provide emergency services to that neighborhood, that one of the areas they cited was that angle because it was not designed properly. So if they were going to add another 300 feet on the end of Brewski Road, then that resource could have been put back at that intersection to improve that intersection, which is going to see the most traffic, which is going to see the heavy apparatus, and maybe have avoided that change in response for that neighborhood. Same if you look at Anglers Road, if that had gone back, you look, maybe it wasn't done as much as it could have or should have been done to the public way at Anglers Road, but that is some of the worst section of road when you come in off 302 and you work your way toward the pond. So if that particular area, if somebody's going to put in a subdivision at the end of Mount Hunger Shore, then if they can back up, if they have the ability to back up to that public way, then that area could be improved, because it is the one with the most traffic, and in that particular road is really the worst section. So I think just some things to think about, and I would just ask that as you work through, just remember those residents that do live there, and now and 20 years from now, when they have a call for services, and we're required to go in and provide those services the best we can. That the access is the biggest thing that we need. We've done our best to try and improvise. We have a pickup truck now that has a plow and a sander on it, just so that we can get in for emergency calls, when it's snowed, because before that, all the roads are plowed. The private road may not have been plowed, and they call for an ambulance. Now we can't get in because Public Works has gone home. So we've done what we can to try and accommodate and make those adjustments. But it's the end user and the resident that, when they call in an emergency, that they're expecting us to get there, and we certainly do the best we can to get there. And all of these things help to ensure that. So thank you.
Under this gentleman that just spoke, I do understand the safety issue, and anybody that has a brain would want it to remain safe. But if you can do what you're proposing, taking away as many rights as we have, why wouldn't you be able to instead just impose restrictions or regulations that are safety regulations, and saying on these roads like Anglers Road, whatever they're talking about, and wherever else, anywhere else, even Inland Farm Road on the hill, where it wouldn't be safe if it was left up to the other neighbors, but our sons end up sanding it so that it will be. So any of the places where there's a safety issue, just say these roads must be brought up. If you have to take money from the town as a loan thing, bring them up to safety, not a super highway and not what somebody might like, but what is safe. Bring it up to that, add it to their taxes, and they're going to have to pay it. Why? I don't know. That means there is somewhat of a burden on the rest of us, because we've got to front the money in the first place to get that road fixed. But it seems to me that would be a lot fairer if the issue is really safety, then address the safety issue.
Any other comment from the public?
My name is David Foster. I live here in Wyndham. I have to ask first, is this meeting tonight going to serve as the public hearing that would be proposed to take place in front of the town council?
No, this is just some public input on the committee's draft so far. That's kind of the last thing on the agenda, but I'll say it now, just that this committee will kind of take this public input and have a final recommendation they make to the council. Then the process is still, for any land use ordinance change, the planning board would need to see it and have a public hearing, make a recommendation to the council. The council will have to have a public hearing as well. This is why we tried not to call it a hearing on the agenda, that it really is just for comments on this draft.
Good. Well, I would ask that anybody that's in here tonight that has an interest come forward when the public hearing in front of the council takes place, where there's a lot more members that will be hearing that don't, a little bit more equitable in their opinions of how this whole thing could go. I understand you're living up there on James Way. My brother is Dan Foster. I have nothing to do with him at all. If anybody's filled their pockets with money and walked away, perhaps it would be him. It certainly isn't me because I share the same last name. But I do feel like, and Tim, you know yourself, Tim Nangle, I'm talking to you, that there are a lot of people that are being punished in the town as a result of what has happened in a couple of areas, in particular James Way. That was the catalyst for the change. There was issues on Lazy Acres, and we understand that, and I think that that could have been, if it hasn't already been taken care of in subdivision ordinances, where Lazy Acre or private, there was subdivisions allowed off in private roads, where you had 12-foot roads going in subdivisions because there was nothing in the ordinance that said you couldn't approve a subdivision on those roads. It was allowed to happen. It created a lot of problems. And to my understanding, I think that part has been taken care of. So, I just think that there should be more consideration to, to the town as a whole and equitability. I stood before the council a couple of years ago when there was a proposal to do a retroactive moratorium on private roads, and it was instrumental to me at the time because I had a lot of money invested in an area that it was going to be very hurtful if there was a retroactive moratorium that took place at that time. But I can still stand here today and say that the way it was before, and I'm basing it on the fact that I think that if you calculated, and Amanda and I'll come in and talk to you about it, or whoever would be necessary in the next couple of days, to see how many private road extension applications have been put forward and approved since this ordinance changed since September 2017. And I would be willing to bet that they've dropped off the face of the earth. Just like Bill Walker said when he was up here speaking, that people can't afford it. People are getting harmed. And then you wonder why all this growth in the rural zone and these bigger subdivisions and, dozens and dozens of units being proposed all at once. And who's it benefit? It benefits the people with the money, the small people like Julie sitting over there that has a few lots off from land of Nod Road that, watching her value diminish, certainly has seen it diminish. And she sits on the task force, one of the McDonald brothers does, for the purpose of trying to see some change, some equitable change as a result of this committee that was formed because of what the town's attorney described as tough medicine for the landowner back a year and a half ago. So, the council agreed to form this committee to try to backpedal things and make it a little bit more user-friendly to the landowner. And I don't see one bit at all. In fact, I see it going backwards. And one of the examples that I have that is really kind of drove me here tonight is that initially after that ordinance change was enacted in September of 2017, real quickly, a couple of members jumped on board, a couple of the council members jumped on board with a 200-foot exemption or whatever the equivalent frontage was in that zone. Why is it today that that's not in the new drafted proposal? Why was it 2 months ago, but on the 11th hour it's taken out? Food for thought. And that's something that the rest of the council will consider as well, because that isn't what this task force was put together for at all. It was to backpedal and to ease it up on the property owners, and instead it's gone in a different direction. So, and then, on another note, the no more private roads off from public roads. I can think of, and you're trying to get away from development in the farm zone. I understand working on ordinances that will curb development in the farm zone, and I apologize if my phone's going off right now. But this no more new private roads off from public ways. In the RM zone up in North Windham on Falmouth Road, I've done a couple of projects over the years there. One was at 498 Falmouth Road. It's called Memory Lane. And Memory Lane, I would agree today, based upon today's standards, it's a it's a horse path. That was what was allowed then. That's what a lot of people were doing. That was prior to 2009 when the ordinance changes took place. That's no longer allowed. After the new road ordinances in 2009, which did allow gravel roads off from public roads to a much higher standard, I put in another road called Kramer's Way. And when I go to the next council meeting, when this is all being heard and voted on, I'll bring some photographs so that you can see the difference in Memory Lane and in Kramer's Way. Kramer's Way is the road that Tanberg did for me a few years ago. The road is in perfect shape. Nobody down there is complaining one bit at all. It is kind of a highway for that area. Recently, a property at 494 or 496 Falmouth Road came up for sale. It was an identical size and shape piece of property as what encompassed the houses on Memory Lane and on Kramer's Way. The property sat, and it sat for months in this market, which is unheard of. It's like, well, I know why it sat and sat, because I looked at to buy it myself. And with the ordinances, the new ordinances that have taken place recently. And in fact, I don't know if it's part of the new draft change or what it was then. All I know is I don't want to get involved in anything where I'm stuck in the middle. But where it says no more private roads off in public ways, that's in an area of town where you're supposedly promoting growth. However, what the ordinances or the proposed ordinance changes are right now that says that you can't have a private road off from a public way. I know why. Now that property is sat, nobody bought it on 2 acres of land, and I can assure you that the people got a lot less money for the property, but they're old, they're elderly, they didn't know, they're certainly not going to come up and speak, they're moving on to Florida. They spent the winters in Florida in the first place. And but the bottom line there is, with the ordinances today, to say that you have to put a public road in off a public road, instead of there being the potential for 3 lots on that, 3 additional lots besides the homestead on Falmouth Road, instead of there being the potential for 3 lots there, there's only the potential for 2 lots. Because in the old ordinances, whether some like it or not, and just like Mr. McDonald talked about some of the properties down on Inland Farm Road, using up some of the density of the road for their, what was needed for the density of the lots. Well, in today's proposal, and again, I'm not sure if it's what was already enacted or it's what's proposed now, but the no private road off a public way. If you could only do 2 lots off that same piece of property and you had to tar the road and build it to the road standards, it just wasn't economically feasible anymore. That's why those people sold the property for a lot less money than what they could have. That's why they couldn't do with the property what their neighbors on both sides were able to do 10 years ago and 5 years ago. So just another example, and I'm just pointing out that it's not just about, the 200-foot exemption that was taken away, the fact that you're taking away people's land rights and stripping people of their property values by making them upgrade roads, now proposed to the equivalent of whatever it is that you extend. At least there was some little bit of a bone for the small people that don't, and I'm a small builder myself. I'm not one of these people that can afford the big developers. I'm not driving, 15-lot subdivisions in the farm zone. It's not my level one bit at all. But it just seems to me that, what's been proposed in the new, what this committee has put forward certainly isn't helping out a couple of the people that sit here that have put the time and effort in to try to ease up some of the problems that they're facing. And when I'm talking about problems that they're facing, I'm talking about diminished property values. I think just some of it is unnecessary. And again, going back to James Way and the catalyst for this all, and I understand you folks that live down there, that shouldn't have ever happened. And, however it did, it's, I guess, because it's what not necessarily, state subdivision statutes allowed, and somebody was asleep at the wheel and watched it go by when all of those houses went in down there. But to punish the rest of the town, because it's a severe punishment to the rest of the town, to people that have lived here, some of them all their lives, they're paying for that, and it doesn't change one bit at all what's already happened up there in James Way. Somebody filled their pockets up there, and you know how that happened in part is because somebody had the money to put the roads in advance. Take Julie Farley, for example, that never had the money to put the road in that she memorialized prior to 2009 on her property. If she'd had the money years ago, she wouldn't be sitting here on this committee right now facing the same situation that she is, because she'd be like the rest of the money people that can, laugh their way to the bank. Instead, she's being penalized now because of what some have done. So, that's the long and short of it. I just think there should be some serious consideration to backing this whole thing up a little bit. That's all. Thank you. Can I just add one more thing, please? I see and recognize a couple of people here in the audience that I'm pretty sure it's the people that I bumped into in the grocery store back a few months ago, and I don't usually interrupt somebody's conversation, but the conversation was about private roads. And the couple that's sitting back here was communicating with another older couple, and I don't know if it was neighbors of one of their parents who had offered them a gift lot so that they could build a home on. And the conversation went, because we were talking about private roads, and I was at the dairy section, and I happened to pick up on it, and I had to eavesdrop a little bit and then jump in and say, talk to them a little bit about it and encourage them to get involved, because the bottom line is they were offered a lot that's 400 or 500 feet in off from the end of a private road as a gift. And the way the conversation went is, we have somebody that's going to give us a lot, but doesn't do us any good because these new road changes we can't do it. It's just not economically feasible for us to do. So I'm kind of speaking on behalf of, maybe I'm confused. You got the wrong. Okay, you're a TV. Okay, I'm confusing. Okay, and I'm familiar with your land as well. In another situation where it's not economically feasible. Right.
We have a buyer.
And you lost them. Right. You lost me as a buyer. Yep.
Too expensive.
Thank you very much.
Any additional comments from the public?
So I think there were a couple of questions asked that we should take an opportunity while people are here to try to answer. I think the most recent one was, had the committee thus far given some consideration to altering this standard for no more private roads off public streets? I wasn't participating with the committee, so I'm going to, this whole time, let someone else attempt to answer that question.
As far as no new private roads off of public roads, that really wasn't addressed as part of our committee work. We were really trying to address the issue of existing private roads that are in a standard that's doesn't fit one of our current private road standards, and to try to make a poor substandard situation better. So to directly address the issue of no new private roads off of public road, that really wasn't talked about during any of our committee meetings. I think that's fair to say.
If I mentioned it, I'm sorry. That was just part of what change took place in 2017.
Yes, that's correct. And I wanted to make the point when we began that was one of the changes, along with the removal of the backlot standards, which certainly we've heard in the last year, has been a surprise to people. And I think that was the answer to your question: how many road applications have we seen off private roads? I think Bill Walker is correct that we have not been seeing subdivisions off of those roads. And only once the exemption was added to the ordinance have we seen private road applications off of private ways since September 20, or since April when that amendment went into place. As I'm typing, I didn't separate questions as someone.
Go back to go back and address some of the questions that are some of the comments that Chief had, and that's one of the things I concentrated on, was improve vital point / access to private roads for people who currently live on them and people who want to live on them in the future. And that was one of the focal points that I tried to bring to this ad hoc committee. It doesn't matter if you own it, if somebody else owns it, or if it belongs to a family member, or if it belongs to somebody who just bought it who moved up from Massachusetts or California. Safety is vital for all of our neighbors in Windham. It doesn't matter if you're Windhamite number 1 or you're Windhamite number 18,000. When a fire happens or a medical emergency happens, you want access. And one of the problems we have with our private road standards is that they are not being enforced. Ms. McDonald talked about putting teeth into it, and that's what we're trying to do. Lay out some standards, not to take away people's personal rights, but to put some kind of standards down that a developer like Mr. Foster can come and look at and go, okay, here are the rules. We can meet the following things. If we can't meet the following things, we come back to the experts, the engineers, and the planning board and the council and say, this is why we cannot meet this. There's ledge. This is, this percent incline. Those are the things that I was specifically trying to address. Some of the other issues where people cannot do this or they cannot do that, there's a million of them. And no matter how you write any legal textbook, no matter how you write any ordinance, there's always going to be, well, this gets me. This gets this person. This gets that. Really, we were trying to find a reasonable person standard. There are people up here who were on Mr. Foster's side. There are people up here who were on the exact opposite side. And there were people who were in the middle. And what we are is a cross-section of Windham. We appreciate the feedback that you brought today. When they go before the planning board, when it goes before the council, we want you to come back and speak on it then. Because only when we have everybody's input, everybody working together, can we come up with something that's going to be best for the town. And for things to be best for the town, there are going to be moments when you hurt a little bit, when I hurt a little bit, when Mr. Foster hurts a little bit, when Ms. McDonald hurts a little bit. But at the end of the day, if we all hurt a little bit, nobody hurts badly. So we have to work together as a town. We tried to do our best up here. We're going to take your input back. We're going to go do some work on it. And maybe there will be some more changes. This is why we came to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
I'd like to address Mrs. McDonald's comments about, let's see. You said that you do understand the safety issue, and if there's a safety issue on an existing private road, that we should tell the landowners or the road owners to fix them, or the town fix them and add them to the taxes. We can't do that. We cannot go in and fix someone's private road. It's actually against the Maine Constitution. We cannot expend public funds on a private road unless there is a winter maintenance, unless there's a public easement on that road. Now, if we have a public easement, we can then enforce some standards, but we cannot go to a road association or a landowner or anybody and say, you have to fix this road. The only way we can do this is by requiring roads that don't meet standards to come up to standard if you're going to modify that road. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there has to be some triggering event, and Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but there has to be some triggering event that you're going to add more homes, you're going to extend the private road, something like that, where then we can require, we can set standards that require the road to be brought to a certain standard. But as far as just going in and saying to somebody, we don't like this, we can't do that.
I don't think so. But as far as, what you are doing now is when the,
And this isn't the back and forth on
Oh,
No, go ahead.
I just to clarify. When you are using that triggering event, though, right now it seems to be the one person who triggers the event, but you're still not taking into consideration all of the others. But I don't know if this is doable or not. But as far as the fire and rescue, though, it does seem to me that they could at least write a very strong letter saying that if you expect us to get down there in a timely manner and not wreck the equipment, the road must be brought up to standards. For instance, you could pave it and do anything you want with a road. If somebody doesn't plow it and sand it, it's still not going to be safe. So it seems to me that the safety emergency could demand that if they're going to go down there.
So I asked for a list of all the private roads when I began on the committee. It took several weeks to get that list. I did drive by as many as I could. I did it via bicycle and I also did it via car. It was pretty easy for me to ascertain someone who has literally no knowledge of what it takes to build a road, the grades, the loads, all that stuff. I had to learn all that stuff as we went on this committee. It was very clear to me, either in a car or on a bicycle, some of these roads are not adequate. When I asked at the committee, did we have a list of inadequate roads? The response that I received was that adequate is in the eye of the beholder. So the town does not have a list. They have a list of private roads, but they do not have a cumulative list of roads, and they haven't graded them as far as inadequate, adequate, not adequate, based on any standard. The other point that I wanted to make was that when we sat here in the committee meetings, what we did was we tried to think about who we would be impacting. I'm a numbers person. I like to see numbers. I like to see trends. I like those kinds of things. At no point are our decisions based on numbers. They are based on what we believe. We have varying backgrounds, but if you look at our backgrounds, it's very cited. So what I will tell you is that I personally would like to see more numbers supporting our recommendations. One of the things that I asked for in one of our more recent meetings was when we talked about upgrading the road, we talked about where are you going to ask the person to upgrade the road? Is it going to be at the beginning? Is it going to be where you're starting to build out the road, so extend the road? To me, it made a lot of sense to start where you're extending it. You're going to build it to a new standard going forward, so why not go backward that much and increase it? Discussions on the committee were mostly cited towards the beginning of the road. Mm-hmm. I asked several questions. Why are we starting at the beginning? So I appreciate your feedback because that makes a lot of sense. But
well, the draft is not at the beginning. It's
that might have
from the extension.
Nearest intersection. The reason being is the beginning of the road. Maybe that person may not have the right to upgrade that section of road.
I understand that. However, a lot of our decisions were not based on numbers. They were based on what we felt as a committee, based on our backgrounds, was the best. We did have discussions with John, and Amanda was at a few of our meetings. But as a committee member, that's what I was most disappointed with, is we could not support some of our recommendations or our rationales with, this is how many people it hurt, this is how many people it helped, which is a lot of why we're here today. Because when those 2009 standards went in place in the 2017, a lot of people didn't know about them. People are busy, so they don't have time to come in here and listen to this meeting for an hour and a half and not understand half of the things that are being said, so they don't know until they go try to sell the land that their land value is diminished. And so we've made decisions the best that we can based on the knowledge and background that we have. But I would ask you, as the public, do your homework, go and talk to Amanda, go and talk to people at the town, spend the time because it's worth the time. I wish that I had spent more time because I've been significantly impacted by this.
There was a question, maybe it was someone about the road maintenance agreement. Just to clarify that the requirement that's in here is for maintenance agreements for new roads. Not we understand the legal. We can't legally require people to create road associations or other people to join associations that don't exist. So this is requiring evidence for new roads or extensions of roads that there's a mechanism in place to maintain those new roads.
We did clarify that with the town attorney, so that is a factual statement.
Mr. Foster's comment about the exemption being taken out, I don't remember us taking that out.
That was at the last meeting based on the discussion about you have scaled back the improvements to the existing private way such that it's no longer as onerous to people to do the whole road network. So it should be a contribution somewhat like every new road and extension of road should contribute to improving the existing road network.
Again, there was no fact or figures behind looking at who that exemption initially helped or did not help when it was passed. And this committee did not look at numbers to determine if these impacts would help or hurt more or fewer people. There are no numbers to prove that.
I think I had heard another question about differing road standards in different zoning districts. I know that wasn't part of the discussion of this committee. It is something that is part of the discussion with the Long Range Planning Committee and working on the zoning changes that they're looking at in farm and farm residential zoning, but again, not part of this round of revisions. I think as John mentioned, the committee was focusing on this. What should be the standard to improving existing private roads that really aren't built to a standard today? So I think those comments are noted. Was there?
One of the concerns I heard tonight was pavement. It's a big one. And that's a big one for me as well. I live on a dirt road or gravel road, and I don't want it paved either. So I understand people's concerns. Way the standards are today, you have a road with 10 houses on it, and someone wants to extend it to put 11 houses, that's the trigger to pave. So the entire road back to public way has to be paved. We created an intermediate step to that. It's called the upgraded and extended private street standard, and we've moved that number from 10 to 30. So I think that's where that's where the big compromise is. Now you have up to 30 houses can be accessed by a gravel surfaced road instead of a pavement. And I know that was the biggest concern when I was on the council, and people brought forward it's cost way too much money to pave a road to put in 2 to 3 houses, and it's just not worth it. I get that, and that's why we moved these standards up and tried to create this intermediate phase to try to make it more economical for people, and also keep the rural characteristics that people want in the farm zone. They want to put in 5-6 houses on a dirt road. I mean, I get that. So I think that's one of the biggest things we got out of this is introducing that standard, that intermediate step from under 11 houses, gravel, anything over paved. And paved meaning public street. So. Hopefully that answered any questions about pavement tonight. I know there was some talk about that.
Let me just clarify that upgraded extended road is only for existing private roads. So a new private road that's going to have more than 10 homes on it does need to be paved.
If you're building a new,
right,
putting any essentially
it has to be a public road anyway. There's no private road.
And then the other, I mean, one of the things that I think about is, yes, I understand that there are people that live on the road now that like it as dirt or gravel or whatever you want to call it. I guess it's gravel, right? But it's dirt too. Anyway, so but eventually, the idea is to promote longevity in the road, and we have a lot of roads that are present in watersheds, and dirt roads, gravel roads that are not maintained create environmental issues. So that's something else that we've kind of struggled with. So
one of the other things that we took into consideration with the extending of roads was they automatically cause increased traffic and thus increased maintenance problems. So that was all part of what we did when we created this table. So.
And going back to, once again, the safety aspect of it, we found or tried to find middle ground between the quaint country lane and the 4-lane superhighway that some folks were afraid of. So what we did was, instead of going to a 20-foot paved road with 2-foot shoulders, we said 18 feet gravel with those 2-foot shoulders. They'll allow you to have drainage, allow you to have places to put snow and everything, but does allow a fire truck down. That allows us a couple of full-size pickup trucks to pass each other without worrying about somebody going off in a ditch. So we did try to find middle ground. It wasn't one way, it wasn't the other. There were some contentious moments, just like over Family Thanksgiving, but at the end of the day, we tried to come together with a product that we wanted you to take a look at. Now that we've gotten your feedback, we're going to go back and possibly tweak it again. So please come to the next public forum with more ideas, a little more knowledge of what the process is, so we can tweak it at the planning board. And then finally, when everybody's had to look at it, we present it to the council, and the people we elected will make a decision that's hopefully best for the 18,000 people in Windham. Not for Michael, not for Julie, no, not for Tim, but for the town of Windham.
Is that why you didn't invite me to Thanksgiving, Michael?
No, I didn't invite you because you're free.
Hopefully we addressed any of the questions that were brought up tonight. I know there's a million more of them out there, but.
Well, there's a couple things I need to look at later. I can't answer off the top of my head right here, but find me later to follow up if we didn't get it. But did you have something, another one?
Yeah, just somebody had a definition of driveways. So driveway, section 300-3-6, driveway, a route that provides access to no more than 2 lots from either a public or private right-of-way. A driveway shall not be used to provide frontage. And it then talks about section of frontage, which is on page 3-7, the length of front line measured at the street right-of-way. And it talks about, what you required for an individual lot. So that's the definition of driveway and frontage for the record.
Yeah, thank you. So if we move on to next steps, the committee is going to review all the comments that we received tonight at their next meeting, have a discussion on what to incorporate into the draft. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m. in conference room 1. And, that kind of discussion will continue on until there's some kind of consensus on, are we drastically changing something? Do you want to have an additional public forum? Or it may be writing the recommendation to the council on where you're at so far. And so then it would be on a council agenda at some point in the near term. So that's the process going forward. And then, as I kind of explained, if the council accepts what they see, the process is planning board, public hearings, council, public hearings.
Just on that driveway point, just as an aside, that driveway very well might get named as well. So people might see that as being a private road, but because of frontage issues or distance or sight lines, that particular driveway where it serves to might still get a name and a sign to meet the 911 addressing standards.
Yeah, that's right. There is a difference between what's a road and what's a driveway. Just because it has a name, it could be a driveway, but E911 requirements are naming that. So because it requires a name, it's
right, but why isn't it like
something driveway?
Driveway.
That's
Smith Road.
The 911
Smith private.
I'd have to check.
There's suffixes.
Yeah, the suffixes can't say road.
It has to say there's a list of approved suffixes. Yep. That's right, under the E911 law. Yep. So. Right. Okay. So I think that's.
Yeah. We have any. Yeah. Sure. Oh, absolutely.
I just want to remind everybody, it's been said, but we don't have any say, and we're just going to make recommendations to the planning board and the council. So you really do need to come. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone to come to the public hearings that where the people that make the decisions are. We just make recommendations. So you really need to come to the planning board public hearing and the council as well.
And please tell your friends, because this is not something that they're mailing out notices to people who could be impacted. This is on word of mouth, so we do advertisements, but if people don't see the advertisements, they don't know what's going on. So if you know somebody that's impacted or even could be impacted by this, I would very much encourage you to reach out and have them give the town a call.
Can I ask a question?
Come up.
Is there still a private road committee?
This is the private road committee.
Okay, so every single private road in this town used to be on an email list that. Anyway, every single private road in this town used to be on an email list, and we would get emails about stuff like this. This affects every single private road in Windham. And there's no reason why, with today's technology, that we're not notified about this.
So
there is zero reason why we find out by catching a Facebook post on Tuesday during the day when we should have known like 2 weeks ago.
How do we keep that list up to date?
Well, I would say that it's pretty simple. I mean, how hard is it to update an email list? Every single private road has contact with somebody at Public Works. There's a list.
The list with public easements.
Can I make a comment on that? There's a list of public easement roads. And to try and keep that list active with contacts, they have their meetings. And then when they elect a new president or whatever, right. And when you send things out, you get nothing back because you're sending out to somebody that's washed their hands of it. So it's extremely hard to try and keep that list active. To make the roads register. I mean, it's...
But it isn't that much work if there is a list.
I mean, I live on a private road that's plowed, and if you guys as a town tell me, hey, you're not going to plow me if we don't have contact with you guys in some form or fashion, then I'm going to be very well sure that I do that. And I think I don't think that's unrealistic.
Yeah, this is like beyond the scope of this meeting.
Right. But my point is why, again, there's a private road committee that there's an email list out there, and yet none of us have been contacted about this. And this affects us.
I understand your comment. I'm the president of a private road. He's the owner of a private road. She's owner of a private road. And this is the first I've ever heard of a list for the town. So it's something I'm interested in as well. So believe me, we will definitely take that one down and try to do some investigation on it because I want the town to know. I want the town to be here. So we will work on that.
Not to mention there's
the list that exists at Public Works. I'm sure. The list that exists at Public Works is for ones that have public access. That's the only list. And what happens is when you have your road association meeting and you became president, nobody notifies us that happened. So the only thing we can do is send out to whatever we have. And I'll make sure that before it goes to the council and the planning board, that'll be sent out.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.